Hi everyone. Okay, so today we had Game 7 of the World Chess Championships 2013 between Vishy Anand and Magnus Carlsen, with the latter now 2 games ahead with 6 games remaining, a very commanding lead. But as we've seen before, Anand never gives up, and it will be very interesting to see how the players approach the remaining games. Anand had white, and he didn't deviate from his previous games and opened with e4. And Carlsen saw no reason to deviate from the opening that's been working very well for him, the Berlin defense of the Roy Lopez. So after e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, he played knight f6. I for one have been hoping for a Sicilian, as I'm sure I've made clear, and it would be great to see one before the end of the match. But why try something new when you have a winning formula already, is probably what Carlsen was thinking to himself. So Anand now played what he had used in the previous game, d3, just denying black this knight takes e4 option, which it appears he may have done some preparation in. So anyway, he continued with the same line that he played in game 6, bishop c5, and now Anand deviated from that game with bishop takes c6, doubling the black pawns after d takes c6, but giving black the bishop pair. This was quite a surprising choice of opening from Anand, because many were expecting him to be out for blood, and it's a fairly quiet opening. This leads to kind of a slow, maneuvering, calm game instead. So he continued here with knight bd2, and Carlsen played bishop g4 to defend this e-pawn indirectly. So Anand challenged it with h3, and now bishop h5 and knight f1. Anand is solving the problem of his pin by playing knight g3 before proceeding further. And it's important to note he can't play g4, hoping that after bishop g6 he can play knight takes e5, because queen d4 is forking the knight and mate, as we saw in a similar position yesterday. We're looking at the opening. So knight f1 and now knight d7 is overprotecting c5 and e5, and Anand continued with knight g3, inducing Carlsen to exchange. So bishop takes f3, queen takes f3, and now g6, preventing the knight from making any further progress. So Vishy continued development with bishop e3, and he has the idea here of castling long, perhaps trying to sharpen things up a little bit, but Carlsen was having none of that, and he played queen e7 here, just further bolstering the bishop. And the point is that after white castles long, black can also castle long. And this is still a known theoretical position. The players are talking about it in the press conference afterwards. Generally, as I said, it leads to slow and quiet games. There was some debate amongst the commentators as to why Anand still opened with e4 if it was likely that Carlsen would play the drawish Berlin. The main reasoning, they believed, is because Anand knew what to expect, and it's a case of the devil you know being preferable to the one that you don't. Even so, I still think Anand should try something else, but perhaps all of his prep was in the king's pawn openings, and he might have it in his mind that there's a chance Carlsen could play something different. So it's understandable why he's sticking with the king's pawn as well. So there's not too much going on in the position here. The doubled pawns don't really mean too much. Even if we get to an endgame, it's not going to be that relevant. So one of the plans in this variation is for white to open the h-file and create play that way, which is what Anand set about organizing. First with knight e2, and after rook h e8, just finishing development, again overprotecting e8, and maybe preparing some later central play, like maybe preparing f5 or something like that. Anand just played king b1, and now Carlsen played b6, just further bolstering the bishop, and also obviously the c5 square, which is going to be like a strategical strong point for black here. If white ever plays c3 and d4, he's weakening himself quite badly on the d file, and the same is true if he plays a3 and b4, is weakening the kingside. Not worth it just to kick a piece. He'll regret it badly in any endgames. So So Anand now went for the standard plan with h4, and you know, maybe he was hoping for the opposite side's castling here, but Carlsen doesn't have to allow that to happen. If he can castle long as well, and you know, there's no need to go into those kind of risky, double-edged, really aggressive games when he has a comfortable lead and he can keep the position quiet if he chooses to. So king b7 and now h5. And in a press conference afterwards, Anand said it may have been better to play a bishop g5 before pursuing this plan, just provoking a weakening move, or knight f6 is also a weakening move. But he didn't do that, he just played h5. So now Carlsen initiated some changes. Bishop takes e3, queen takes e3, and played knight c5. So the knight comes to this nice outpost. So Anand continued with the thematic idea, h takes g6, h takes g6. So white has this open h file. And he can also play for f4, and you know, expansion and initiative on the king side, which is what g3 is aiming for. And you know, in the press conference afterwards, it was clear that Carlsen was already looking for ways to simplify and induce mass exchanges and secure the draw in this position. And you know, he only has this option because of the opening that Anand chose. So again, it was a strange choice on his part not to play something sharper and, you know, more aggressive than this quiet line. And maybe his nerves are shot and he's just doesn't feel he can handle it. But you know, it's now or never pretty much. So Carlsen continued with a5 here. It's gaining space on the king side and ensuring that this nice knight on c5 can't be kicked with b4 anytime. You know, he'd have to be prepared with a3 and b4, and as I said, that's too weakening. So rook h7 from Anand, and this h-file play is normal, but rook h7 seems to be a little inaccurate here because it can be kicked with knight e6 and knight g5, or it can just be directly challenged. This g6 move by black was initially to control the g3 knight, but it has a second purpose that we'll see in a second. So the next move was rook h8. Just Carlsen, as I said, playing to neutralize and induce changes. So rook dh1, rook takes h7, rook takes h7, and now queen f6 with the idea of playing rook h8, and this is why this g6 move has a second use. So f4 from Anand, and white doesn't have time for something like queen h6 because then f2 drops and it's just completely winning for black. So there isn't time to try and dominate the h file. So rook h8, rook takes h8, of course not f takes e5 or queen f1 check, simply winning. So rook h8, queen h8, and now f takes e5, queen takes e5, and we're going into a drawish endgame. And you know, this can of course mean big trouble a lot of the time when you're playing Carlsen, but in this case it seems that there's genuinely nothing to play for in the position. This h file has been neutralized, the rooks have come off, and this doubled pawn for black is irrelevant really. So Anand played queen f3 to attack f7. If he plays instead d4, he doesn't win a piece because queen takes e4 can be played, and if he takes the knight, his queen drops, and if he takes the queen, then the knight recaptures, and he's just lost a pawn. So queen f3 instead makes more sense. So f5 from Carlsen. So, you know, the f pawn was attacked, so he's just pushing it forward to get rid of the attack. E takes f5, g takes f5, and not queen takes f5. Or suddenly white has a huge edge. Queen takes f5, g takes f5, knight d4. It's winning f5 and almost certainly the game as well. So you know, you always have to be careful, but a player like Carlsen isn't going to make that kind of mistake. So g takes f5 and now c3 from Anand, genuinely threatening d4. So knight e6, and this move also prevents knight d4, another of the reasons of playing c3, and That would have been a nice move for white to be able to play. It's attacking f5 and also c6, so this is obviously the best move, and no surprise that Carlsen played it. So king c2 from Anand, and this is another of the ideas why he played c3, just to play king c2 and get the king more active and into the game. So knight g5, attacking the queen, queen f2, the queen is tied to defending the knight from the black queen. So knight e6, black retreats, and now we see a repeat of moves. Queen f3, the silent draw offer, as it's sometimes called, and Carlsen was happy to go into that. Knight g5, queen e2, knight e6, and now Carlsen extended his hand, and Anand accepted the draw. So it was a fairly uneventful game, really, but definitely a victory for Carlsen, given the match situation. Surely Anand will have to try something sharper in his remaining 2 games with the white pieces. Time will tell. So Carlsen remains 2 games ahead, now with only 5 games remaining, so it's a very healthy lead. Tomorrow he'll have white, and he will be hoping, of course, to extend his lead even further. Perhaps it will be with the black pieces that we'll see Anand try something a little more offbeat and risky. It's clear that Carlsen is virtually unbeatable and definitely at his strongest in the endgame. So perhaps the best way is to try and beat him during the middle game with a mating attack or something like that. Obviously, it's easier said than done, but of course, it's probably one of the only things you can try against Magnus. I mean, you're just not going to win in the endgame. And it honestly feels like Team Anand are running out of useful ideas, so it might be time to just throw the kitchen sink at Carlsen and see what happens. So in any case, it's sure to be a great game, and I hope to see you there. Thanks very much.